Welcome, Newsa-Cast listeners. So happy you could come to our YouTube channel. For those of you who haven't been to our podcast yet, remember, these throwbacks are what you're getting a snippet of in our podcast. We have this wealth of content from the Red Smith Banquet and all of these interviews. So our YouTube is going to take that little piece of the interview that we have in our podcast and expand out to the full interview. If you haven't had a chance to check our podcast out, please check out Spotify or the iTunes page and subscribe and grow our listeners, and keep checking back each week so you can check out these throwbacks.
Absolutely. And you've already found YouTube, but if you take it just one step further and just click that follow or subscribe button right above that video that you're watching right now, that would be incredibly huge for us.
Yeah, and this week we have Goose Gossage. He was our throwback for the podcast, and Goose Gossage, if you don't know who he is, one of the premier relievers ever to play the game of baseball. In fact, when I think back to growing up, I think Goose Gossage when I hear closer. He would pitch 2 or 3 innings. He had that big bushy mustache. He had that stare that he was going to kill the batter. Just incredible reliever, actually,
Yeah, when you think of baseball reliever, it's Goose Gossage. I mean, he had it all. He had the look, he had the intimidation. Well, and then he had the pitches as well. The guy was he was basically unhittable.
How did he get his name, Joe?
Funny you ask, Tosh. Back when Goose came in 2013, we had a fellow by the name of Dick Fredericks that was a scholarly fellow, and he dove into research. So I'm actually reading this from the program, from the 48th annual Red Smith Banquet, and Dick Fredericks came across this and said that the nickname Goose came about when a friend did not like his previous nickname of Goss. The friend noted that Gossage looked like a goose when he extended his neck to get signs given by the catcher while he was pitching. Thus, the name Goose.
That is incredible.
That is.
I remember sitting down at a table with Goose before the banquet and just talking to him about being a reliever, and the fact that, how did you pitch as many innings as you did? And not like today's pitchers where they pitch 1 inning and they're really specialists. He would pitch 2 or 3 innings. I think
Absolutely.
You talked a little bit, or you talked to me a little bit about the statistic in 1981 when they played the Brewers.
Yeah. We talked about this on the Newsa-Cast. The pitchers, bagger relievers in those days, they weren't specialized like they are now, or they didn't come in and pitch even 1 inning. It was usually multiple innings. And case in point, in 1981, when the Yankees were playing the Milwaukee Brewers in the American League Division Series, Gossage recorded a save in all 3 of the Yankee victories, and he did not allow a run in 6 2/3 innings. So, he's shutting down the game, certainly the 8th and 9th inning, and sometimes from the 7th inning on. And that's what a reliever did in those days. And there was nobody better than Goose Gossage at that time.
Yeah, and as you know, we talked about it in the podcast, but he's also a big, huge supporter of youth sports in Colorado, where he's from, and he really enjoys hunting and fishing with his kids as well. So this is a great interview. It ties in nicely to our features on the podcast. If you didn't get a chance, Tim Landwehr and Ryan Marks talk about the outdoors and fishing and their journey to where they are today. So please check out that podcast, but more importantly, enjoy today's throwback interview with Goose Gossage.
Please welcome back to the banquet, Roland Hemond, introducing this year's Red Smith recipient. Roland.
First of all, I want to thank so many people who came here to celebrate Milt Dreyer's birthday again. He's a very dear friend, and he made sure that I got here for his birthday. It's quite an honor for me tonight to be making the award to the present 2013 Red Smith Award to another great friend. But before I begin, I noted that the very first recipient was Glenn Miller, who resided and grew up in Kaukauna, I believe, and was the farm and scouting director of the Chicago White Sox at the time that tonight's recipient, Rich Gossage, was drafted in 1970. The very first year, his first full season in professional baseball, Rich Gossage really put on a show here in Appleton with the Foxes, with a record of 18-2, an earned run average of 1.83. It was a real treat for me to have come to Appleton that season. And late in the year, in August, where he won every award that could be won as a player in the league, and he came to me and he said, "Roland, what's the plan for me for next year?" I said, "Well, think big leagues. We're going to take you to the Major League Spring Training Camp." And his mother was visiting, so he immediately ran over to his mother and says, "Roland said, I'm going to the Major League Camp next year." Little did he realize that he would win a job on that staff. Chuck Tanner, our manager, and Johnny Sane, the great pitching coach, both recognized that we had a rare talent in Rich Gossage. And so he opened the season and spent the whole season with the Major League team. Had a record of 7-1. He was 7-0 going to the last game of the season, and we were out of the race. And he said he'd kind of like to start, so Chuck gave him a start, which wasn't successful that particular day. But in any event, as a fireman, he really put on a tremendous performance to help the White Sox in a pennant race all the way through until, unfortunately, Bill Melton suffered a back surgery in about the last part of July. And I always felt that had he been able to be healthy the rest of the year, that we would have finished ahead of the Oakland A's. But in any event, it was a great experience for a raw rookie to be in the midst of that type of race. And one gentleman in our ball club, Dick Allen, who was the most valuable player of the year that year, took Rich under his wing, and he kept telling him how to pitch to the best hitters in the American League, because Dick was a real student of the game himself and a rare talent, so he knew how he probably could be handled by pitchers with the velocity that Rich possessed on certain pitches and on the hands. So anyway, it was you saw a veteran player, a great manager, great pitching coach, and a bright, young, competitive, aggressive, gamer, winner to be in our bullpen. And he set a new process. So as a relief pitcher in those days, he would come in about the 6th or 7th inning, and the ball was his, and he would finish the job. So you felt very comfortable sitting upstairs to know that the game was on the line, but we had the ball in the right hand of Rich Gossage. And to see him progress through his career and to be an all-star for 9 years, 22-year career, I mean, with that tremendous power arm that he had, to stay in great shape and compete for that length of time. Usually a pitcher might run out of gas at about 10 years, but 22 years in the major leagues. And one of the proudest moments of my life was to be at Cooperstown in 2008 when they introduced Rich Goose Gossage as a member of baseball's Hall of Fame. So to have him here tonight with me, it gives me the goosebumps again, because through your career, you deal with so many players, but very few can achieve what he did and to become a member of baseball's Hall of Fame. So I could go on and on to talk about him, but I think that he knows how I feel, and I know how you feel about what he has done since his early days in baseball here in Appleton. And I thank you for the support you gave him through the years. And I travel around and go to a lot of places, but when I come here, it's really inspiring to see the camaraderie, the spirit, the devotion that people have to help the youth and the young students and athletes of this area. I call it Appleton is baseball's America's best. God bless you all, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Roland. I can't think of a better guy to have this great award presented to me. You know, I grew up out in Colorado, and all I wanted to do, Mickey Mantle was my favorite player, my idol growing up, and I couldn't imagine getting a guy out like Mickey Mantle or all these great players that I had idolized growing up as a kid out there. And all I know is when I signed that contract, it was the first time I knew that I needed an agent. They offered me $5,000 and I held out for $8,000. So, you know, it was never about the money. At that time, I would have paid them $8,000 if I could have gotten it and paid them to play. But, you know, I promised myself that day, my father had passed away when I was a junior in high school. And, you know, he was the guy that, you know, threw his arm out. He was a great athlete growing up, and he threw his arm out, and so he never really got the opportunity. But he always would tell me, hey, Rick, he says, you're going to play in the big leagues someday. And I'd say, oh, Dad, please don't say that. You know, I just couldn't even imagine. You know, I thought Mickey Mantle, who was as I said before, my idol, I thought these guys were like cartoon characters. They were fictitious. They really didn't even exist. And the closest I ever got to a Major League Baseball game was the game of the week with Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese, if we all remember that. And that opportunity came to me that day. I ran in the house. I had gotten a job upon graduating out of high school. I didn't know if I was going to get drafted by a professional baseball team or not. And I came running in the house that day and I said, Mom, I got a job. I said, up at the park where I grew up playing my youth baseball, coaching the kids that summer. And I was so happy. And I said, Mom, I got a job, you know. And she said, well, this gentleman over here has a job for you too. And I had my back to him. I didn't even know he was there. And I turned around and there was the scout, Bill Kimball from North Platte, Nebraska, who had been scouting me unknown, you know, I didn't know that he had been scouting me. And right then and there, you know, when I signed that contract, started my professional career. And I was a scared kid. I had never been out of the state of Colorado, and I got on a plane, ended up signing that contract, got on the plane. They sent me to Sarasota, Florida in June of 1970. And I got on that plane, and when I got to Tampa, Florida, it was about 11:30 at night, and it was June, and we all know how hot June is in Florida. And Colorado, we don't have much humidity. I'd never experienced that before in my life. And I got halfway down the stairs. It was when we didn't even have jetways, and they rolled those stairs up to the plane, and we got off, and we were deplaning, and I got halfway down. I came out the door of the plane, and wow, this blast of heat hit me and almost knocked me down. And I said to myself, and I said it out loud, I said, wow, those jets of that plane are hot. And this guy right in front of me stopped, and I almost knocked him down the stairs, and he said, son, he said, those aren't the jets of the plane, I hate to say. He said, welcome to Florida. And that was 11:30 at night, but that was one of the first experiences that I had. I spent a couple of weeks down in Sarasota, Florida. I did very well down there. And guess where I was sent next? To Appleton, Wisconsin. So this was the second stop of a career that I promised myself, hey, I don't know what I'm getting myself into, and all I wanted to do when I started out was put on a big league uniform one time. That's all I really thought about. I thought, man, what must that be like just to put a big league uniform on? And, you know, little did I know that I would have the career that I had, but I ran into some great people early on in my career, as Roland Hemond alluded to. Roland was one of those guys. He was the general manager of the White Sox at the time. Chuck Tanner, who was a tough guy. And man, you know, I look back at the greatest teachers that I ever had, and they were the toughest. And I think we'll all agree with that. When we look back, we may not have agreed at the time, but when we look back in hindsight and think about, the people that influenced us, those were the best teachers, were the toughest. And I had Chuck, who, like I said, was very tough. Dick Allen took me under his wing. And it was an education that all the money in the world would not have paid for. He taught me how to pitch from a great hitter's standpoint, and where I had to make those pitches and what pitches were difficult for those hitters to handle. So it was an education that, like I said, I could have had all the money in the world and I couldn't have paid for that. Johnny Sain was the greatest pitching coach that I ever came in contact with, even after that. He was my first pitching coach in the big leagues, and he taught me so much. I had no idea even how to throw a breaking ball. I remember, spinning a curveball in Quad Cities one night, my first time here in 1970. I'd let go of that curveball and it flipped out of my hand and went in their dugout. Well, I think I struck out the next three guys. They didn't want any part of that. But, that was when I first found out that, hey, just a little bit wild's okay. And, I liken my career to a little kid, a 10-year-old kid that goes to Disney World and waits in a 2-hour line and gets on his favorite ride or her favorite ride. And it lasts for, 2 minutes. I got on the greatest ride and it lasted for 22 years. And I still, thank you. I still have to pinch myself that I had the kind of career that I had. The 9 different teams that I played for. The Yankees, I grew up a Yankee fan. My dad and my mom, my whole family were great Yankee fans. Growing up in Colorado, we really didn't have any connection to any other ball club. Now we have the Colorado Rockies, but back in the day we had minor league baseball. The White Sox were an affiliate of Colorado Springs. And, my mom used to wait on those guys, and she was a waitress, and she loved waiting on those players. And that was really one of her highlights, and she used to always talk about it. And, getting on that best ride and then having it culminated with an election to the Hall of Fame, people go, how come it took so long, 8 years of eligibility to get in the Hall of Fame? I said, hey, the longer you have to wait for something, the sweeter it is. And that was so true in that case. To run into these guys at the juncture in my career, firsts, so many great firsts. It was like being in the right spot at the right time. And I can't help but think that Appleton had an influence on my career because everybody was so genuine up here, genuine and so friendly. And the people that I stayed with the 2 years that I played here opened their homes up to us, to me and to the rest of the players. And I still have friends today that, Ed Holtz was the general manager of the Foxes. I loved those old ballparks, Rob. The lights were lousy. I'm not quite sure that I'd had the career if I'd been in your stadium, with those new lights and the bright lights and throwing 100 miles an hour. Man, I loved those dark lights in the Midwest League. But, it's just one of those things that it's a storybook career. The friendships that I made up here. I came back shortly after the new stadium had been built. Goodland Field, I drove by there. Milt took me by there last night, and it just brought back so many great memories. And the Midwest people going up to Milwaukee and playing those great Brewer clubs, and the Yankees, when we came into town, wow, did that become a great rivalry. The Toronto Blue Jays, it was the Beast of the East, man, that was a great division back then, and man, it was a knockdown drag out. The parity, everybody was great. And, that was when I really saw how great a team. I played with this 78 Yankees. We won a world championship. I played in 3 World Series, was selected to 9 All-Star teams. just the things that happened to me. You know, baseball has a great saying in that, you know, baseball is made up of guys that have been humbled and those that soon will be. And, you know, that was told to me at an early age. And another thing that Chuck Tanner really, really emphasized was you. And he would get right in your face, and he had terrible breath. He smoked cigars. And I would even say that if he was sitting right here tonight. But he was a tough guy, and he would get nose to nose with you and look you in the eye. And one of the things that he told me, he said, take care of the fans. And I think that's what we've heard from all these people that have come up here with these different organizations, that the fans, you guys and folks and girls and ladies and boys, and some of us never grow up, but it's all about the fans. And without you guys, we wouldn't have a game of baseball. We wouldn't have a hockey game. We wouldn't have basketball. And it's all because of your support. And, you know, I tell people all the time, I get to talk to a lot of people at different banquets, and baseball, every life's lesson is out there on that baseball field, as well as that football field. And, you know, baseball is a perseverance. You know, I said baseball is the toughest game of all to play. There is nothing, and I don't know if you guys can think of anything, but that you can fail at 7 out of 10 times and be a superstar. I don't think so. We wouldn't have a job if we failed 7 out of 10 times at the things we do for a living. So that just really says it in a nutshell about how really difficult that game of baseball is to play. And it's not all about the wins and losses. I think in youth sports and our kids, I think we put too much emphasis on wins and losses. It's how you play the game. It's not how, if you win, sure, that's a big feather in your cap, but it's how you go about it. And, you know, I was very, very lucky to run into Roland and Chuck and Dick and Johnny and all those other great coaches. And even after my career, that first year, you know, the people that I met and the fans and people that my association with different people around the country, those 9 different teams, the great managers I played for, the great teammates that I had was amazing. And like I said, it was like getting on that best ride at Disney World and lasting for 22 years. And I want to thank all of you here in Appleton, and what a great community you have. Green Bay up the road, oh my God. Mike and I have something in common football-wise. I'm a Denver Bronco fan. So we're in the same boat. And but we're going to knock the shit out of them next year, okay? So thank you.
Please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that notification bell so you'll get notified when we post another great episode or interview. Download the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for your support.